Here at DeLille Cellars, we use the most modern scientific techniques to determine the harvest time for all of our grapes. What do you think, Paco? He says they're not ready yet.
Washington State is one of the few states that have a thriving industry and a thriving agriculture. The Cascade Mountain Range splits Washington into two halves. To the west of the Cascades is Washington's metropolis, Seattle. It has a marine climate zone that consists of rain, mild temperatures, and low overcast, making up the climate that many know Washington by. However, due to the Cascades, rain clouds have a difficult time traveling to eastern Washington with their moisture intact. This causes the climate to be different on the eastern side of the Cascades. Over here, we find a climate that is much more suited for agriculture. A semi-arid climate like eastern Washington will have hot, sunny summers, allowing for nutrients from the sun to be more abundant, and the marine climate to the west ensures plenty of rainwater can be irrigated to the east. Washington is known for its apples, sweet onions, and now its grapes as well. In the recent 30 years, wineries have realized Washington's potential for good vineyards, and thus good wines. Among these vineyards is Boucher Vineyards, owned by Dick Boucher. Boucher originally grew cherries, apples, and Concord grapes. As the wine scene began developing, Boucher began growing wine grapes. In this he found success, being named Grower of the Year in 1989.
Oh, these are good. They're not there, but man, they're very lively. I like them.
Gotta like those old vines, huh?
Yeah. Unfortunately.
At first known for his Merlot grapes, in the recent years he has began growing an unparalleled Syrah. Well-sloped soils, allowing for water drainage, but not too much, as well as nutrients and nitrogen levels, are the reasons Boucher Vineyards have grown such high-quality grapes. In addition, Boucher himself is accredited for having a good sense for picking a plot to grow on. His dedication and extreme attention to detail really allow him to produce a grape quality few farmers can achieve anywhere else in the world. Red Mountain is another area in eastern Washington that is famous for producing the highest quality grapes. Known for its Cabernet as well as its Syrah, Red Mountain has a natural ecology that really complements growing grapes. Red Mountain has become one of the main suppliers for wineries all over Washington for many reasons.
Well, we first came to Red Mountain, I and DeLille came to Red Mountain in '92, and it was really evident immediately that this is where the big stuff is really grown. This is where the big Cabernet Sauvignons take place with good firm tannins and great ripeness and structure and everything else. We can grow grapes all over the back of the state, but this is where the big Cabernets are really come from. It's a combination of, first of all, Red Mountain is delineated. It is a little southwest facing slope with only a few thousand acres that makes it a very small AVA, and it is separated by the Yakima River, Yakima Valley, and Red Mountain itself to really separate itself from the rest of the state. Second of all, like I said, it does have a southwest slope, which is perfect for Cabernet. It is an area with a little rain halo where it gets even less rain than other parts of the state. And there are other reasons why that part of the state really has a great potential for growing Cabernet Sauvignon grapes.
Despite all the perfect conditions for grape growing, there is one challenge that eastern Washington presents that every farmer faces, and that's the extremely cold winters. The temperatures drop below zero in the winters and can freeze the vines. In extreme situations, this forces the farmers to chop some of the vines off. In the best situations, the buds are frozen and they lose a percentage of their yield. It is not uncommon for a vineyard to lose 50% of their crops to freezing. One vineyard, however, has never seen more than a 50% loss, which still gives them some increase from the previous year. Harrison Hill is the oldest vineyard in Washington. Starting in the 60s, the growers knew a lot less than we know today. However, they did know climate, and upon testing the soil, found their plot of land to be warmer. Many attribute their ability to withstand the freeze to the higher temperature around their plot of land. In recent years, growers have become more green in their methods of growing. Though there are many different ways to farm, Upchurch Vineyards chooses sustainable farming.
We chose sustainable farming for Upchurch Vineyard. I think that, first of all, you have to realize that Washington State is one of the greener areas in the country. I mentioned that there's low rainfall. In order to have a lot of microbiology, which is molds or mildews and things like that, you have to have a combination of sun, then water, sun, then moisture. It's like a petri dish for this molds and bacteria and so forth to grow. And we have the sun, there's no question about that. We just don't get the moisture. So we really don't have as big a problem as mold and mildew pressure as most other, especially Europe, has. So we start off green because we don't need as much sulfur and other things to prevent the mold and mildew as other areas need. But going beyond that, no farmer or no grower is more conscientious of the plot and the vineyard that he owns than wine growers. And that's because we talk about wine in terms of terroir. And terroir is about the plot, the flavor of the plot, the place of where the grapes come from is so important that a lot of vineyards actually have an individuality because the combination of soil and climate and everything kind of separates it from everywhere else. In Saint-Emilion, for example, they have this real strip of yellow clay, and that clay, yellow clay, really gives it kind of an individual contact where Merlot really does very well. We have our own in Red Mountain, and because of that, we really want to pay attention to not destroying the soils and the plants. So we really want to be green. So how do you go about doing that? There's a couple of different methods. One is called organics, another is called biodynamic, and the one that we've chosen is a sustainable farming. I don't like organics because organics was developed for other crops in other parts of the country, and it's very rigid, and it doesn't work with grapes as well. And the result is that I've never had a great bottle of wine that came from organic farming. Biodynamics is a more holistic method that's very popular in Europe, and I will say right off the bat that there are some amazing Grand Cru wines that are being made from biotechniques like Loire and Zinhambrecht. A lot of great rural wines are made with biodynamics. But biodynamics are really developed for European type of growing. They do have mold and mildew pressures there, so they need some things that will really help them out. They allow sulfur in biodynamics because sulfur works well with microbiology, but as I mentioned, here in Washington State, we don't have that much problem. We won't really need sulfur as much as other areas, but we do have pest problems that they don't have, so we need to attack that in a green method more than anything else, and biodynamics is often doesn't really take that into account as much as sustainability. Now, sustainability is what I call the pragmatic aspect of green growing. The idea behind sustainability is very simple. You can maintain that forever without destroying anything. The four cornerstones of sustainability are one, you got to protect the soils and your environment. destroy them, obviously your vineyard's not sustainable. Number two is you got to protect the employees and the people that work there, because you start killing them off with pesticides and everything, that's not sustainable either. Number three is that you have to have quality, because if you do all the green stuff and you end up with real bad quality, you can't sell the product and you can't make the wine, and then again, it's not sustainable. And four, the business has to be sustainable. They say, who cares about business? Well, if you don't make a profit or at least break even, guess what? You go under and it's not sustainable either. Now, these are things that I can deal with. I can deal with those four things and realize that they're practical. And whereas the holistic method of biodynamics sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So even though, like I said, I will admit there's some great wines, particularly in Europe, being made from biodynamic techniques. But for me, we've chosen to do sustainable. We are certified live. That's out of Oregon. That's low impact viticulture and enology, and it's a great organization that really they come out and inspect everything, make sure they go over your records. We have to have everything that we use. We have to show that we're using little or no pesticides and everything else, and we have to prove to them that we're doing that. I believe that we're also important to Washington State. We're also certified Salmon Safe, and Salmon Safe is a organization that protects the watersheds for the wildlife and the salmon. Obviously, that's important up here in Washington State. You start polluting the rivers, and by pollution, I don't mean dumping oil into it or something. I mean that just having stuff come off your vineyard and go into the watersheds is not a good thing. You can't even have erosion, because even erosion can clog up rivers and stuff like that. So it's a great organization that makes sure that we're taking care of the watersheds in eastern Washington.
One of the most successful wineries using these grapes is DeLille Cellars. Since 1992, this winery has seen nothing but growth and praise. Being the son of the winemaker, Chris Upchurch, I was allowed to compile footage of the process that goes into the grape harvest, bringing the grape from a fruit to a wine. The first thing that happens is the grapes are poured onto a shake table. Here, the bunches are inspected, and any leaves, insects, or bad grapes are discarded. The shake table then dumps the grapes onto a conveyor belt that takes the grapes up to the destemmer. This machine removes the grapes from the stems, throwing the stems in one direction and the grapes in another. The stems are dropped into a bin where they are collected, then thrown out. The individual grapes fall onto another conveyor belt where they are individually inspected. Any bad grapes, insects, or leaves that have made it this far are discarded before the grapes are either transferred to a press or to a giant vat. The press collects the white grapes into a container with a giant lung inside of it. The lung inflates and presses the grapes. While this is happening, the press spins, allowing the grape juice to pour out of the holes at the top. The juice is mixed with yeast and then poured into barrels where it ferments. Red grapes are poured into the giant vats, where they will macerate and ferment. During the harvest, the winemaker will come back to these vats and punch down the caps of skin that form at the top of the container to mix the grapes. After a time, the juice and the skins are separated, and the wine is poured into its own barrel. In general, white wines ferment for less time than reds. 80% of fermentation is done within the first few weeks. After that, the process slows down, and the remaining time depends on the measurements and methods used. Some wines are ready within a year. Others are best drank 10 plus years after fermentation begins. So what makes Washington grapes so good that we would go through all this trouble?
Well, Washington State is a perfect place to grow grapes. It is a fine wine growing region. It's not a matter of why do we not go to California or something else. We don't have to. This is one of the great wine growing regions of the world. we're just discovering how great it is in the past 30 years. And what we found is that this is a perfect place to grow Bordeaux varietals, Cabernet Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and so forth, as well as Rhone varietals. It's a combination of the soil, which is this kind of well-drained sandy loam soil, and with good pH, and also a great climate. We have on the other side of the mountains in eastern Washington, we have a rain deficit area where we get on the average of about 7 inches of rain a year, particularly in Red Mountain. And that 7 inches is mostly during the winter time. A lot of it is snow, so it really is during the growing season, and during harvest in the fall there is no rain for the most part. And what rain does come really has no effect. So we have the climate, we have the soil, and now we've discovered all the other things that we need to do to make Grand Cru wines. Again, it is, and everything that is there was done 10,000 years ago in the Missoula floods, and that has created an area that is a Grand Cru area. When I say Grand Cru area, I think that there's a couple of things that really go into it. First of all, it has to be a good place to grow grapes, which obviously Washington State is with the climate and the soil. But the other thing that makes it a special place is that it is unique in the world. There is no place on earth exactly like Washington State. It has to do with the Missoula floods coming out at the end of the last ice age to carve out the eastern Washington and create an area with a lot of south-facing slopes that are perfect for growing grapes with perfect soils, and add to that a little volcanic ash from the mountains, and we get an area that really is unique in the world. So we can make unique wines as well.
Looking back, it's easy to see why Washington has acquired such a thriving wine culture. The climate, soil, temperature range, sunlight, and agricultural knowledge really encourage a good grape. And where there's a good resource, artisans will follow to create an amazing product.